Welcome to the Muscle Expert Podcast with Ben Pakulski, one of the world's top professional bodybuilders, an expert on human performance and mindset mastery. Ben dives deep to deliver the strategies of the top experts to upgrade your body, mind, muscle, strength, performance, biochemistry, and how to become the upgraded modern man.
I need to say hi, everybody. Can you have? Well, there's nobody listening. Can you talk? What should we say? Do you want to sing a song?
No.
So Daddy's going to talk to my friends, and we're just going to record a message for them. What should we say?
Hi.
Hi. What else? You know what we're going to teach them about? How to eat. How do you eat? What's your favorite food?
Steak and kale.
Steak and kale. What's your favorite snack?
Steak and kale.
Steak and kale. You like other stuff? What else do you like?
Steak and kale.
Is that all you eat?
Yeah, steak and kale.
Steak and kale. What did you have for dinner today? You had chicken and kale.
Yeah.
And some sweet potato pasta.
Yeah.
What else do you like? What else are your favorite foods?
Strawberries and blueberries and raspberries and...
Oh, you do like those, don't
bananas.
you? That's a really good one.
Are you going to teach us all of those?
Yeah. Everybody wants to know what Presley eats for breakfast.
It's soft.
It's soft. How about, what's your favorite snack at night?
At night, a drinky.
A drinky. You like banana ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that your favorite food is meat. When my daughter wants to eat food, she eats meat. She might be a carnivore.
Maybe.
Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. Today on Daddy's podcast, we had this very nice lady, and her name is JJ. And so what she taught us about was she does a lot of things around detoxing the body. So a lot of people eat a lot of bad foods, and they take a lot of bad things into their body, like bad makeup and different types of soaps and perfumes and things that are actually making their body work not so well. So Miss JJ teaches us what we should take out of our life and out of our diet to help
in our body.
In our body to help our body work better. JJ also talks about what inspired her to shift her focus toward leading a generation of warrior moms. Do you know what that means? Strong mummies. Strong mummies teaching strong boys and girls. She tells us about why we're going to reduce our toxic burden and detox before losing weight. You know, Daddy teaches the same thing. I think it's very important that you get rid of all the yucky stuff in your body, right? All the yucky stuff in your house. What do we get?
And you pee it out.
You do. What are we getting rid of in our house right now? What's the thing that Daddy says we're not having any more of this? What are we doing? What are we getting rid of?
We're getting rid of junk.
Junk. That's true. But how about plastic? Are we getting rid of
Yes.
plastic? Yeah, we're not having any more plastic, right? That's a
It's
very
not
important
good
thing.
for you.
It's very bad for you. It's bad. More importantly, it's bad for you, but it's bad for the earth too. So we want to take care of our earth because we only get one. JJ also teaches us about the foods she recommends that we avoid, how she fits fitness into her busy life. Imagine how much Daddy works, right? This lady works even more than Daddy. She works so much. She travels a lot. She's very, very popular and teaches lots of strong ladies.
Is she stronger than you?
She's pretty strong. Are you going to be a strong lady when you grow up?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're already a strong girl. Yep. JJ gives us tips to live our greatest life and our greatest body. And she has a new thing. You know what her favorite thing to do is now? Spend time with her kids, her boys. And she also likes something called fasting. Do you know what fasting means?
No.
Fasting is what Daddy does all the time. Whereas I wake up in the morning and I don't eat the whole day. And then when the day's done, then I'll have a nice big dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all.
And you'll spend time with us.
That's right. And I spend as much time with you as I can in the evening.
Can you talk through the sides?
Yep. It hears you. It hears everything you said. You want to say hi? Can you say this for me? Can you say enjoy the show?
No.
Say it for me, please. No. Say it for me, please. Say enjoy the show.
No.
Okay. Well, everybody, enjoy the show. Can't say that.
The word's not in my mind.
It's not?
No.
How about now?
What?
Say enjoy the show. Say it loud. Say it to her.
No.
Please. For Dada. How come why are you shy?
'Cause
Can you say, enjoy my daddy talking to Miss JJ?
No.
No. Okay. You did great.
I don't want to say anything.
Okay. High five. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I am hosting an incredible woman who's leading literally the entire world. She's become an authority on intelligent nutrition. She's become an authority on food intolerances and really teaching Americans how to start shifting their diet away from the typical American diet, the standard American diet loaded with fats, bad fats, and obviously tons of sugar. JJ Virgin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here. Do people still eat that standard American diet? Oh my gosh.
You know, it's not even in, I always make the joke, like I live in my own little bubble, as I'm sure you do, right? You get to see certain things in your day, you see certain people, and you just don't realize like that there's actually people out there, you know, lining up for McDonald's and lining up for these fast food restaurants, and, you know, Dunkin' Donuts is still in business and all these things. I'm like, gosh, I just don't get, and smoking cigarettes. I'm like, do people still do that? And it's unfortunately, it is a reality, right?
It is. Well, I just also came back from Europe where everybody smokes. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then I was in Germany and I finally looked at someone. I go, what is it with vegetables and you guys? I can't find broccoli to save my life here. What is it?
So, you know, most people are going to bring you on the show and they're going to want to dive into talking about nutrition and sugar and intolerances and all these amazing things. But what I want to start with is the thing that I told you that really got my attention about you is the idea of being a great mom, because my greatest mission in life, and as we talked about briefly before we stopped or before we began the podcast, was my greatest mission is like, how do I lead a next generation of incredible little human beings to really change the world? I mean, if we're going to make an impact, yes, we can do it ourselves, but yes, we have to make sure that everyone around us is, you know, leading the world as well, and you know, leading from the front, basically. So tell me about how you really became, you know, the story behind how you really, other than just becoming a mom in itself, but the story behind how you became inspired to lead a generation of moms, because you're doing a lot in that space.
To be a warrior mom. Well, you know, what I was saying offline is like, don't we all feel that way as parents? If not, probably shouldn't be a parent, because this is not a job for the faint of heart. Oh my gosh. Like, where is the manual before you get into this, letting you know what's up?
So one thing that I've come to realize is you may not know before you have a child that you're not going to be a good parent. So there's this whole oxytocin conversation, right? And if some people don't know they have a deficiency in oxytocin until after they have a child. And oxytocin is that kind of that bonding hormone or bonding neurotransmitter that allows us to connect with our child or connect with our community or connect with our spouse or whatever it is. And some people actually just may have some mutation that doesn't allow them to have significant amounts of oxytocin. So, I mean, I used to look at parents and go, God, why are you not bonding with your child? But it could actually be a chemical deficiency.
Yeah, it could be PTSD. I mean, there's a whole lot of things going on. It's, you know, one of the things that's important before you have a kid is to really do a good detox, get yourself as healthy as possible, both the man and the woman, emotionally too, right? And, you know, to really understand what you're getting into. It is the coolest thing ever that you can do in your life, and the most challenging, and will make you such a better person. And you just can't.
Agreed.
It's funny, just before we got on, I was scrolling through Instagram, and one of my girlfriends just had a baby. And she literally posts, she's got this cute picture of her with her baby. And it's Emily Fletcher from Ziva Meditation. And she says, no one told me it would be this hard. I'm like, you know.
That's why they're so cute, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you have to love them. So speaking about detoxing, I mean, I'm the guy leading the conversation in the muscle building and fitness space about like, hey, this is why you have to do it. So many people are trying to manipulate hormones. They're trying to manipulate testosterone, estrogen, cortisol, and all these things. And what if it was as simple as, hey, stop putting such a massive amount of toxic burden on your body and allow your body to actually do what it's meant to do and not have to constantly be fighting back these toxins? What if it were really that simple to start optimizing the way you feel, the way you look, your energy? I'd love for you to talk to us about a detox and what that really means.
Good, because I'm about to lead a masterclass on it, so it's all fresh in my mind. So I'm obsessed with why people can't lose weight and what could cause them to gain weight. And when I say weight, I mean fat, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
And I have been hooked on this since I was in my teens. So this is now like 35 plus years of me being like obsessed with why people can't lose weight. And one of the clear issues is toxic burden. And we know toxins are stored in the fat. But they're not just in there. I mean, that's what your body wants to do so that they are put away and they can't create damage. But the problem is they are endocrine disruptors. They mess up your hormones.
Yep.
And so we look at these things, we go, oh my gosh, that person has diabetes because they're overweight. But the N. Haynes study showed that people who are overweight didn't have diabetes because of the weight. They had diabetes because of the toxins stored in the fat. So when you look at toxins, the biggest thing that they do is mess up your hormones. They mess up your thyroid. They mess up your insulin. And if you look at a lot of the processed foods out there and a lot of the chemicals, they're estrogenic. And you think about it, I don't know how old you are, but when I was growing up, girls didn't start developing at age 11. And there was one chubby girl in class. You know, she was probably, I don't know, 10 pounds overweight, and she was the fat girl, right? Nowadays, she'd be the normal girl. There was never, there was no one who was obese in class. There was no obese kids, none. Now we got, how do we have 1 in 5 kids are obese? What? Like what? How is this happening? Clearly, there's something so super wrong. And yes, we're not as active as we used to be. Yes, we have technology that's keeping us up late at night. We're not sleeping well. And then we've got all the EMFs. And yes, we've got fructose and artificial sweeteners snuck into everything. But on the other side, we're also just like bombarded by toxins. And our body, if we can't excrete them fast enough, which we can't. I mean, if you look at the stats of how much each of us has in our body, we're not, even if you're a good detoxifier, you're not going to be able to get them out without some focus on it.
Yeah, absolutely. The conversation on estrogen is one that I'm a huge part of. And there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Anthony J, who, if you don't know him, you should definitely get him on your podcast. He just wrote a book called Estrogeneration, and it's absolutely incredible, talking about all of the sources of estrogen that we're being exposed to and how to start reducing and eliminating them. And then we got into the conversation of, the abundance of and overuse of plastics in our society and the Pacific garbage patch and things like this. And, I'm literally getting behind the complete elimination of single-use plastics in my day-to-day life. And just from a perspective of my own health, my wife's health, and my kids, like getting rid of water bottles, getting rid of.
Wouldn't it be interesting to see what
plastic Tupperwares?
Look what water bottles have done to us. On the one hand, you're like, great, we're drinking water. But really, if you're drinking water from a plastic bottle that was in a warehouse that was heated up, and then I remember even worse, like how about those people that are like, I want my kid's water bottle to be cold at school. So they put it in the freezer. So you had it heated up, then you put it in the freezer. Then it's like, oh my gosh, phthalate water.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get the argument, like, hey, metal is heavy or glass is heavy, and I get it. And my kid can't carry that. But the reality is, like, just give them less water. And then you compound the negative effects of what's actually in our water supply, right? So Dr. J and I talked about that. Hey everybody, this episode is brought to you by Optimizers. Crank your muscle gains to new heights by actually absorbing the protein you eat. So many people are massively consuming protein, especially people in the keto diet, people in the carnivore diet, or just people looking to build their greatest body. And if you're taking anywhere near your body weight in grams of protein every single day, whether it be from shakes, supplements, or food, you're gonna get issues with digestion. You're going to get bloating and gas, and all these things are disrupting your body's ability to synthesize proteins. You are not what you eat. You are what you absorb. So even feeling backed up sometimes from having too much protein in your diet, I highly suggest every one of you starts adding some type of digestive support. And the one that I've been using for a long time, you guys have heard me talk about this since I started this podcast, is Masszymes. Masszymes has an awesome formulation specifically designed just to break down protein, just for us high protein consuming folk. Masszymes is a product that is actually formulated by a very good friend of mine and one of our guests of the podcast previously. And he's an awesome guy. It's going to help to boost your immune system, honestly help improve skin, improve digestion, improve brain function and focus. These are all benefits I get from that personally. Undigested protein is going to rot in your gut and allow bacteria, poor bacteria that we don't want in there, to thrive. So it's really, really a big issue. And one thing that I actually do, this is a little hack for you guys, is I actually like to take in proteolytic enzymes when I'm not eating. So wake up in the morning, and if I'm going to fast a little bit, there's been a lot of evidence to show that proteolytic enzymes on an empty stomach are really, really good for decreasing inflammation, specifically joint pain. So what we'd like to send you guys is an awesome discount for Bioptimizers. And if you go to masszymes.com/muscleintelligence, you're going to get 15% off automatically, or you can use the code MUSCLEBEN18, MUSCLEBEN18, and you get 15% off at checkout. I highly recommend you guys check that out. Enjoy the rest of the episode. If you could start to speak about some of your strategies for people to start, one, paying attention, because obviously change creates or requires awareness, but two, to start actually removing some of the toxic
when I looked at it, I looked at okay, there's two sides to this. There's the toxins coming in, and then there's the toxins going out, right? Step one,
right. Yep.
Less toxins coming in. Now, you and I both know that we could go to the most pristine part of the world that's never been touched by humans, and there would be toxins there. Some naturally occurring in the environment, but a lot of them because, hey, air blows, water flows, right? So they're all over. There's no way to avoid them altogether, but at least we can do the best we can. Quit all the plastic water bottles, quit all of the processed food, change the cleaning supplies in your house. I mean, cleaning supplies and personal care items are some of the biggest places we get them, because you think about it, it's like what we put on our skin's a sieve, what we're eating, what we're drinking, what we're breathing. So look at every single way that you can control and eliminate anything in that situation in your environment. Obviously, like I travel a lot, there's only so much we can do. Although, have you stayed at that one hotel yet? They have it in Miami, they have it in Brooklyn, they have it in New York City, and they are dedicated towards being a green hotel. Now, the only problem is their rooms are so wired. I'm like, you're a green hotel with excessive EMFs. I was like, what is this?
EMFs
but they even have
a
water purification system in the room for you to get your fresh water. I was like, this is so awesome.
Incredible.
The One
and that's
Hotel.
called the One
shout
Hotel?
out to them. So you want to control as much as possible. So that's the one side of it, right? I mean, don't add to your toxic burden. But it was interesting. If you look at some of the research, even if you've never been subjected to a specific chemical, we found these in people's bodies because their mothers had, right? So so you're a little history book. So the other side is you got to get these suckers out. And the challenge is that it's not so easily done. I mean, there's obvious things you can do with your food. I mean, the big thing with detoxification is I look at it as a continuum, starting with like, what are the first things you can do to start getting things out of your environment? And then I start to look at, all right, what are things we can do to start eliminating it? Obviously, make sure you poop well, sweat well, pee a lot, right? So drinking good, pure water, making sure that you've got a lot of fiber in your diet that can absorb the toxins and pull it out, making sure that you're sweating well. I've got a sunlight and sauna at home here, an infrared sauna. And that's really important because it is hard to get the toxins out of the fat. That is, saunas are one of the great ways to do it. But something as simple as dry brushing, starting at your feet and brushing up towards your heart. Dry brushing before you take a shower is another great thing to stimulate the lymph, and the lymph is what carries all the waste. And then making sure you're getting enough protein. This is one of those things, I'm going to rant a bit about these juice cleanses that make me insane. Because detoxification is a very nutrient-dense process. And one of the things that happens when you free up the toxins is you obviously want to get them out. This is why if you're doing something that makes you feel worse, not better, it's your body saying, hey, stop it. And one of the things you have to do is have a lot of these different amino acid compounds to pull, that are grabbing hold of the toxins that have been freed up and pull them out of the body. So if you're doing a juice cleanse, you're actually freeing up toxins, but not escorting them out. So we got to make sure that we have not only just have protein, but that if you're over the age of 35, if you're under any kind of stress, you're probably going to need some protein digestive enzymes to help you break them down so you can utilize them. Not enough to eat it. You got to be able to break it down and absorb it.
So coming back to removing the stimulus, because I think that's one I don't want to brush over, because I want to get some specifics from you, particularly being a woman. Cosmetics become such a big thing, right? And the appearance of, having to always wear makeup and always having to wear perfumes and having to always be aesthetically, smelling fresh. I think that's a big thing. Like, how does a woman start to remove these things? If she wants to wear like a body spray, or if she wants to wear a nice smelling laundry soap or something. It seems like such a common thing in our society. How do we start pulling that out, and what tips of
all right, so I have got some amazing ones. First of all, my green fills, my buddy Steven Azell makes I told him, I love doing laundry again. I love doing laundry. And he even has these little laundry dryer angels that you can put in to make the laundry smell well, that are all essential oils. The other thing you can do is use essential oils. I've got a couple friends who are doTERRA reps, and so they're always, I was like, I've got doTERRA all over the place. But everyone is, but it's like, this stuff's awesome. So I was like, great, give me more. So there it is. That's an easy one. And then I use Anne-Marie Gianni's skincare line, and it's just, it smells so good. I feel like I want to season my food with this, it's right. It doesn't smell weird and artificial or chemically. And then with makeup, the mineral makeups are a great option. So there's a lot more options out there. Now, I'm not 100%. Like, there's still things that I do that are absolutely not the best choices, but I pick my shots, So, because I've got EMF, so obviously I'm on the phone right now. I'm on Wi-Fi with you doing this. So we're going to have some things we can't avoid, but you do the best you possibly can. And there's a lot of stuff you can clean up. If you go, I use Thrive Market, so I get a ton of stuff from them for cleaning supplies. And that's, I think, one of the easiest places to start is with cleaning supplies. Just make that shift.
Yeah, and that's definitely low-hanging fruit that people just don't pay attention to. Even all the airborne odors that are coming from those cleaning supplies is massive. And, then you're putting your food on it and you're consuming that stuff. I think that's probably the easiest one.
Mm-hmm.
That and water, I think, is probably the two low-hanging fruit that absolutely everyone should address. As far as addressing water, do you have a whole house filter? Do you have one in particular you advise people to use?
All of our houses, we have really good water filtration systems. So it's one of the things we've always done. I do have that AquaTrue filter back at my other house as well. I have a couple houses. So I use that AquaTrue filter at one of the houses also. And then we have some stand-up air purifiers in some of the different rooms too. So that is another thing, because it's air and water. And here's what you have to think of. It's not just the water you're drinking. Your skin is a sieve. So super important to think about, what you're bathing in, what you're showering in. If you are bathing every day in something and, your water has got chemicals in it, guess what you'll have?
Yeah. Now, as a mom, how do you keep your kids out of a chlorine pool? Like, that's a huge concern for me. We have a pool. We just moved into a new house. The old house, we had a saltwater pool. This one, it's chlorine. We haven't switched it over yet. And I'm like, kids can't go in the pool. They're like, what do you mean, Dad?
You live in Florida. You can't go in the pool. Summer. Come on.
And so what? Yeah. Well, it's a tough thing, right? And, we're so cautious of not allowing it to be in our water. So what I did, we were on vacation last week in North Carolina, and I filled up a water bottle with just tap water, and I let it sit out for a little bit, let them smell it. And I'm like, gosh, that smells like a pool. I'm like, yeah, and you were going to drink that, right? And now making them more aware of, hey, don't put this stuff into your body has actually made them a little bit aware of the possible side effects of being in the pool. But, obviously you live in California, right? Are you concerned about chlorine in pools?
I have a saltwater pool over here, so that's good. And truthfully, it's interesting. Even though we lived in, my kids grew up in the desert, we just weren't in the pools that much. Some of them were saltwater, some of them were chlorine. We just made the best choices that we could. But, fortunately, they weren't huge pool people. We more often drove over to the beach. So that's the best pool there is, right? Unless it's Santa Monica, in which case there always seems to be some toxic waste spill. So.
Great. So moving on to some of the action steps that people can take to start removing the foods that they're intolerant to. Because I know this is another thing, right? So as we accumulate toxins, it's adding inflammation to our body. People are having a really hard time losing fat. And one of the things that you're really leading the conversation with is, hey, you got to start removing these foods that you may be intolerant to that may be causing inflammatory cascades
it was
in your body.
Interesting. Again, this all started out because I was trying to figure out why the heck are people not losing weight? So I started out as a trainer. It was me and Mark Sisson of Mark's Daily Apple and Primal Kitchen and Body by Jake. This was 30 years ago. Actually, longer than that, 33 years ago, 34 years ago. And I think we were talking about it the other day, and I think it was like, I think we were the first ones, it was in LA. And people were coming to me because they wanted to lose weight. So first thing I learned pretty quickly is you can't exercise enough to compensate for eating crappy. And back then it was all about eating super low fat, vegetarian, right? And doing lots of cardio. And what I learned very quickly is that don't work. It especially doesn't work if you are a woman 40 plus. Right. Boy, does that not work for you. So I went in and started looking at what did work. That's how I started moving into high intensity interval training and resistance training. But I also started to look at the diets and I go, wow, like the diet we are putting everybody on is not what any of, has any historical perspective of success. So I started looking around at that going, this doesn't make sense. And started shifting things. But once we started getting just more like, okay, what should you be eating? The next thing I started to do was work with doctors and do some testing. And one of the things we discovered was people were walking into the doctor's offices and we were doing nutrient testing and food sensitivity testing, and people were walking in complaining about fatigue and they couldn't lose weight and they had belly fat and their skin was breaking out and they had gas and bloating and headaches and brain fog, all that kind of stuff, food cravings. And we would run a food sensitivity test, and it was interesting because the same foods always showed up. It was always the same food. So after running a bunch of these, I went, well, maybe we should, we're waiting 3 weeks to start to pull these foods out. What I'm going to do is do the test and immediately put them on the diet. And then what I discovered was I actually didn't need to do the test because the very best thing I could do was pull the foods out, these classic 7 that were the most common, come back in 3 to 4 weeks and have them test them by themselves by eating them one by one, because that actually is so much more powerful. I think we need to be our own personal health detective and really learn how to connect the dots between what we're eating and how we're feeling, how we're exercising, how we're feeling, our lifestyle habits and how we're feeling. And we divorce ourselves from it. And that is where we get set up to fail, right? It's like then you go on a program, you're like, oh, I'm supposed to eat at these times. And you don't even think whether you're hungry or not, or, oh, I'm supposed to eat this. And you don't even think does that make me feel bad or not? Our bodies are different. Mm-hmm. What might work for me, all this talk now about macronutrient ratios, it varies based on so many different things. You can't just blanket say everybody should eat a certain way. That's crazy. So that's when I started doing the food intolerance plan. I started doing it online, and then I went to a publisher, and I kept working it to make it simpler and simpler and simpler, because one of the things I see that happens out in the health world is that we make everything complicated. We talk in big words and people have no idea how to put it into action. And if they can't put it into action, it doesn't matter how great your idea is.
Absolutely. So what I find as you kind of ascend the ladder, the proverbial ladder of the fitness and nutrition space, everyone at the top is basically having the same conversation, right? It's all the people that are down below, the low level, quote unquote, influencers on social media are the ones who seem to be clouding the message. It seems like everyone I talk to who's really an authority on nutrition, on training, we're all saying the same things more or less, right? We're all saying, hey, you need to learn your body to feel your body. The unfortunate reality is so many people are so disconnected from their body. They don't even know what they're feeling. They're doing everything they can to mute the stimulus. They're always, I have to have something playing in the background so I don't hear my thoughts. I don't feel my body. How do we start overcoming that before, I get the idea of starting to pay attention to these 7 classic foods, which I want to talk about in a second. But do you have any daily practices to start paying, or how you started paying attention to your internal dialogues, to your internal proprioception?
Good word. I am a big fan of journaling. Big fan of journaling. I find that Emily Fletcher took me through meditation practices, and I just need to be super active. So isn't she the best?
She's great.
Love Emily. Love her.
Awesome.
Anyone looking to learn how to meditate, she is your gal. She makes it not like, I was always like, oh boy, she totally made it easy for me to do. However, I find that my best meditation is when I'm super active. And I do best in writing. I just write. So one of the things that I encourage people to do, in fact, back when I saw people one-on-one, this was not optional. And in all my programs, I'm like, this is what you have to do to be successful, is I have them journal. In fact, Kaiser did a study and looked at people and weight loss. And they found that the people who they could absolutely determine who was going to be successful or not completely based on whether they journaled or not. That was their biggest determinant of success. And so I look at it, I go, that's not just about weight loss. That's any habit you want to try to put into place, any success metric you're trying to do. So I think using a journal so that you can look back and go, all right, why do I feel so crappy today? And you can go, did I get enough sleep? Did I eat the right foods? Did I eat the right foods at the right times and the right amounts? Was I stressed? What did I do to tolerate the stress? So it just starts to make you look at all these things. But I also think we need to focus on one thing at a time. In the Virgin Diet, I have people just focus on pulling out these 7 foods and then making simple swaps for healing foods that I find they usually like better, and just doing that, not adding exercise, not starting to work on their sleep, just that. Let's just do that. Once we get through that one and figure out which foods work for them and which foods don't, then we can go to the next level. Maybe it's adding in HIIT training, or maybe it's starting to work on making sure you're getting your sleep, which is probably the single most important thing anybody can do anyway.
You've obviously been doing this for a long time because you get all the tricks of the trade, right? Like I'm a guy who's been training people, thousands of people for endless years, and that's always the trick, right? It's everyone's always trying to change their whole life. I'm going to quit smoking, stop drinking, change my diet, work out, and hopefully improve my sleep all at the same time. And they're just setting themselves up for failure. They're creating massive amounts of stress, anxiety, worry, and they set themselves up for failure. This idea of one thing at a time is something that just seems to be coming up in all areas right now. And one thing I never even thought about before is if you're trying to acquire one new emotion, like the ability to feel one emotion, like just start paying attention to that emotion. So we talked about paying attention to your internal dialogue, your internal proprioception, I guess. Well, just look for that one. Like if I want to look for, if it's compassion, if it's love, if it's joy, if it's, anxiety, like find that one, identify it, become comfortable with that, and then learn that you can, one, pay attention to it. And then when you pay attention to it, you can start to change it. Applying that principle of one thing at a time is such a useful tool for everybody.
Did you read that book,
aspect.
The One Thing? Oh, I love that book.
I did, of course.
I love the book. I love the podcast. Yes. I need to read that book like every day, because I think by nature, especially entrepreneurs, we're like, oh, more things. Like, stop it. You
want to do everything. Yeah. We're talking the same language. So tell me the 7 classic foods. So what are the things people should be pulling
some of them are obvious. I'm sure you would guess them, which are gluten. The ones that showed up the most when I was doing food sensitivity testing, which really is a measure of how permeable, how leaky is your gut, were dairy and eggs were the first 2. And then it was soy, corn, and peanuts were the second tier. Gluten, wheat's not looked at that way. Wheat's looked that way, but gluten isn't. So gluten's a different type of test. And honestly, I think with gluten, I just don't think anyone should be eating gluten. Not in the U.S. It's different when you go abroad, of course, because they have different wheat than we do. But in the U.S., this is not a healthy food. It's going to, if you don't have leaky gut already, which is unlikely because stress and a lot of different medications and the processed foods and GMOs and the different types of antibiotics all can create this. Gluten will take you there. Fructose will too. So I'm not a fan of gluten at all. But I find even if you show that you're fine with it on a genetic test or gluten tolerance test, I find that most people, when they pull it out and then challenge it back, realize they don't feel good on it, that it doesn't do well for them. I mean, we know it affects your brain. So those are the ones that are really more of an immune response, a delayed immune response. And then, of course, I had to put sugar in there, and not because it has that delayed immune response, but because it creates the intolerances and creates the issues with the gut microbiome. So we know fructose and artificial sweeteners can make your gut leakier. That artificial sweeteners can actually change your gut microbiome and make you better at storing fat and more glucose intolerant. So that is why I had to put those in. And the kind of funny story there is when I first started, I had just pulled the 6 foods out because I don't really eat sugar. I don't have a sweet tooth, don't really like it. And so I wasn't really aware of how much sugar people eat. And so I pulled the 6 foods out and I go, what the heck are you guys eating? Insane. What are you doing? No one said you could have all that other stuff. So I realized I had to pull the sugar out too, but it's not pulling out, obviously, all foods, all carbohydrates turn to sugar. So it's not like we're pulling out all carbs. We're just pulling out the mainliner sugar stuff and the artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, gluten's one of those things where, people always want to hold on to the things that they feel comfortable with. And, they don't even notice how bad they feel until they pull it out. It's like the white noise in the background. And I recently had Dr. Tom
Is
O'Brien
one
on
of
the
my
show. Do you know Tom?
besties. Yes.
Oh, he's amazing. And his conversation is just like, no human should have gluten. I was like, God, you're awesome, man. Like that. And that's really as cut and dry as it needs to be for most people. So they realize like, oh, it must be that bad. It's not like, oh, I can have a little bit today and I'll be okay. Like, no, this is a cumulative damage. Every time you consume it, it's lasting effect. Very, 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 very interesting. So one thing that I want to talk about is you have a 7-day challenge. And I want to make sure that every one of our listeners who's, living this reality of having a hard time losing weight or having a hard time understanding the what needs to be taken out and how to put it back in. Tell me about that. Tell me about the 7-day challenge.
One of my big goals, kind of my driving through line, is to help 1 billion people get healthy. And I knew I wasn't going to do that by myself. So I've been working with a ton of different health experts. That's how I know. I've known Tom for, 15 years now, helping them, supporting them as well. And the thing that I never want someone to say is I couldn't do it because I couldn't afford it. And here's the thing. I mean, there's never been a better time to get information. It's all over the internet. The challenge is, as you said, there's a lot of noise out there too. So you got to watch who you're following, because sometimes people grab the latest trend. And I mean, I literally just was watching one the other day that said, you have to be in ketosis to burn fat. I'm like, would you take a biochem class, please, before you start saying stuff like this to the population? But I wanted to make sure that this information was accessible. And, so that's why we put together the 7-day challenge, because I know that most people have tried so hard. The big fat lie out there is that people who are struggling with their weight are lazy, they're undisciplined, they're sitting on the couch, they're eating ice cream bars. Nothing could be further than the truth. These tend to be people who are working harder at it, more focused on it. There's a whole lot of things going on with them that aren't working. And often they're just following the wrong set of rules. They've fallen into this trap of healthy foods are things like, the skinny lattes and the whole grain bread and all this trap, and not realizing that our body's not a bank account, it's a chemistry lab. And these things actually tell your body to store fat, not burn it, create inflammatory responses and cravings and all sorts of problems. So I wanted to give people a simple way to get started in 7 days. The average person, when they do this, loses up to 7 pounds in 7 days. But the bigger thing is they make a massive shift. And you said it earlier, is that people have no idea what feeling good really feels like, that they're kind of in this low-grade crappy feeling all the time, because that's what food intolerance does, is it zaps your energy, it makes you inflamed, it gives you headaches, it makes you feel bloated. And they just start to think that this is normal for them. And it's not normal. And so what it allows you to do is do a quick reset in 7 days to establish a new normal and realize how good feeling good really is. And that these foods that we swap them out for actually probably taste better than the ones they were doing before. And the cool thing is they're so available. Like when I first started doing this 15 years ago, trying to find coconut milk was, you had to go to the Asian market. It was like so hard, right? Forget the other ones, but just coconut milk alone was almost impossible. Now there's tons of options out there. And by the way, that doesn't mean go get all those gluten-free junk food, because that's not what I'm talking about. But that's what we've done, is put it together as a really simple little plan that someone can jump into and make a big shift pretty simply, without starving, without feeling deprived, just by swapping out some of the inflammatory foods for healing foods.
Beautiful. So, JJ, one of the things that really drew me to you, and maybe want to really have you on the podcast, is not only are you having a great conversation about this stuff and teaching people, but you look awesome. And all of our listeners are very health conscious, very fitness oriented. We're all training very, very consistently. Tell me about how your training regimen looks now. Like, how do you work hard every day, or how do you fit fitness into your busy routine?
That was so nice of you. Well, I mean, you wouldn't go to a hairstylist who had like ratty hair, or a manicurist with ratty nails, I would hope,
The unfortunate reality is a lot of fitness people are not looking great, right? They're looking, mediocre at best, and they're trying to lead this conversation that ultimately they're trying to tell you about the problems that they have or that they've overcome, and trying to teach you about it because they learned it today. Where obviously you're someone who's been living this for a long time.
I see a couple of challenges out there when I see maybe a person not looking as healthy as they should, is the fitness person will be very focused on the exercise portion of it. That's one part of the equation. The dietitian or nutritionist will be focused on the food part.
Mm-hmm.
That's one part of the equation. When you really look at what it takes to be healthy, it's dialing in your diet. It's dialing in your exercise. It's having great relationships. I think social isolation is one of the biggest threats we have to our health nowadays. I think they've now correlated it to be the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. It's taking like that downtime out, that mindfulness time for whatever it means for you. It's getting great sleep. So there's so many pieces to this that just one by one need to become habitual for you. For exercise, I've been changing it up for years and years and years. I mean, basically, I've been exercising since I was a little kid. But my biggest go-to always are weights and high-intensity interval training. Those are my big things. And then I have a little dog, she's 6 pounds, who I walk. So, I always tell people you want to walk, but walking is controlled falling. It doesn't count as exercise. So you should be moving more. We should be moving like an hour a day. That just should be part of we are humans, right? We need to move more. And ideally out in nature, and ideally you're walking. I have a really cool backyard and orchard, and I go walk out and my feet hit the grass and the dirt, we need to be doing that and getting out in nature and seeing the sunshine. Super duper duper important. But that is not exercise. For exercise to count, you have to get hot and sweaty, and it should hurt a little bit. So, and it should be progressive, and you should be shifting things, switching things up all the time so your body doesn't acclimate, because that's what it does with exercise.
Yeah, it's all about the novel stimulus, right? So the way I frame the podcast is living your greatest life in a body that you love. And that's kind of how we choose our experts and we choose our guests. So if I asked you, how would you advise people to live their greatest life in a body they love? What would be the three pieces of advice you'd have for my listeners or me?
First of all, decide what that greatest life really looks like for you, because it's different for everybody, right? So what is your greatest life? And that will shift over time as well. And I think that we tend to edit our greatest life and go, oh, I could never do that. So I'll just go with this. And it's so once you've decided what your greatest life is, then go deeper, go bigger, stretch it till it scares you. And then go with that. And ideally find someone who's there and hire them as your coach and pay them more than you can afford. So you'll actually do it.
True story.
My first business coach, my second business coach actually charged $100,000. And I was broke at the time. And I knew that nothing was going to change unless I changed. So I went for it, and my whole business life changed. And it was, I did not have, I was the financial support for my family. I didn't have the money. It wasn't sitting there. I wasn't making that. So, that's why when people tell me they can't afford something, I don't even understand that language. I'm like, how can I do this if this is something that's going to move me forward? So that's the first thing, is figure out what that really is, and then find a coach. I'm a big fan of coaches. And this.
So who's the coach?
I've had a bunch of different coaches. That coach was Allie Brown. And by the way, this isn't calling someone asking if you could pick their brain. That is ridiculous. Stop it. Don't ever do that. It's like going, this is something where if you really want someone to come out and do this, then you hire them for it. So Allie Brown was one of them. Yep. Brendan Burchard's another one of them. Dan Sullivan's been another one of them. So
you're I
was in for 3 years in Dan's group. So I'm always kind of looking for that next level coach in whatever I'm doing, whatever's going on. As far as body goes, that's the other part. And here's a little secret. And I learned this from David Bressler. And he said, everybody who does this has 100% success, but I can't get people to do this. I'm like, all right, let's hear what it is. This must be really hard. And it is this: find the body that you really want to look like, that's right for you. Right. And here is it. I'm 6 feet tall. I've got really narrow hips. My hips and my waist are almost the same size. Right. I'm never going to look like Kim Kardashian ever. Mm-hmm. There's no amount of implants that could ever put, I'll never do it. It's not humanly possible.
Right.
So I would never pick that body type. when I did this exercise, I picked Dara Torres because that's something I could, she's got a very similar athletic body type.
Nice.
So find the body type that works for you, that would be your ideal, and then stick your face on top of it. And that is your goal and aspiration. It's like you've got to see it to believe it. So see it. That's the easiest thing.
Absolutely.
See it. And then pick the first place to start moving towards that, and just focus on one thing at a time until that becomes something that is habitual, that is just the way you live. And then you can go to the next, but don't load yourself up with all this unrealistic stuff. It's like that New Year's, every New Year's I used to do, I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to stop swearing. And it's like, no, I'm not. I'm not doing any of those things. So, it'd be the first day of the year. And I'm like, I'm not effing doing yoga, So I was like, that didn't work. So just pick a thing, get that thing dialed, go to the next thing. And ideally have an accountability partner, by the way. That's the other cool thing.
Oh, and that's where the coach comes into, right? Either a coach or a trainer. But so what's your current obsession? So is there something in your life right now that's new or fresh that you're super excited about?
Oh, boy. What I'm really playing around with right now is I'm playing around with fasting and intermittent fasting. That's what I'm messing with.
So what's your
window? I've been playing around with what I do is I always do a 12 to 14 hour night overnight fast. That's key important. One simple thing that everyone can put into action is just deciding that you eat dinner, you close the kitchen. Do not go back in there. In my perfect world, we'd have an armed guard, we'd have padlocks, we'd have alarms. But really, if you want to look at just some simple habits that you can shift that make massive, profound differences, it's stop eating at least 3 to 4 hours before bed. And so that's one of the ones. And so 12 hours is my always. I try to go to 14. And then on the weekends, I stretch it out to 16. But I've also been one of the people in my mastermind is Walter Longo's business partner. So I interviewed Dr. Walter Longo, great book. And so I'm actually on that little thing right now. And it's not very fun. I will say I'm on his Prolon fasting mimicking diet right now. And I'm just going, all right, tomorrow it's over. Yep. Tomorrow's over. But I like to play around with these different things. I never teach anything that I have not done myself and not experienced myself. So that's what I'm playing with right now.
So he's got you on, is it a 7-day fast mimicking?
5 days. It feels like a month. I mean, it definitely feels like that. It's a 5-day program, but the challenge that I'm going to do next time is I'll be able to figure it out without using the prepackaged foods, because I tend to, that's not really my favorite thing to do.
So have you lost a significant amount of weight, or is it fat, or, how's your energy? Tell me a little bit about that, because I'm curious, because I've done a 3-day fast, and I'm curious to do a 5 to 7 day one. Yeah, it's not a true fast.
It's actually caloric restriction, but very specific.
Right. It's like 700 calories or something, right?
Is I do much better on higher fat, more protein, lower carbs. And it's my genetics say it. My gut microbiome says it. I have done all sorts of testing. I've played around with it. I used to be a low-fat vegetarian. I had trouble even, I had to do loads of cardio, now I'm 55. I'm 15% body fat, on the high end, and very ripped. And that's how I live. So this plan is actually low-fat, very low protein, all plant-based. And you start at 1,100 calories, I think, and then you go down to 700 calories. I'm on day 4. Tomorrow's day 5. And I don't really have weight to lose per se. So I've lost 3 pounds. And I haven't been able to work out, which really annoys me. The first day I did some bursting, and then I was like, you're not supposed to. So I just stopped, because I tried it once before and had to stop. So we'll see. We'll see what the next today and tomorrow bring. But it looks like, probably lose 4 to 5 pounds. I would imagine I'll probably put a pound or 2 back on within a day or 2 of going back to the way I was eating, maybe a pound. But I like this idea. The idea I like in this, that's one that I've been really playing around with, is this. You hear this all the time. Diets don't work, right? How many times do we hear this? Diets don't work. They actually do work. We are just not using them for the right thing. If you really look at these different diets out there, a lot of them are meant to be short-term therapeutic approaches, right? But yet we're not thinking of them this way. We're thinking of them like I've set up all my programs where there's cycles where you're really identifying things so that you can develop an eating plan that will work for you. But there's cycles. And so if you look at this, I think that we need to think much more in terms of dietary cycles. So maybe I'm going to do a fast or a fasting mimicking diet for 5 to 7 days. And then I'm going to go back to the type of eating that works well for me. And maybe I dropped 3 to 4 pounds off of that and I keep 3 pounds off. Well, that's great because now I've just downshifted, right, without damaging my metabolism. And I'm still in my healthy eating stuff. I did this because I just come back from Germany and Czechoslovakia. And I was like, even though I didn't go off the rails on anything, I was dying because it's all potatoes and meat. It literally is. It's like meat and potatoes and beer. It's ridiculous, honestly. It's like, where are the vegetables?
At least you enjoyed yourself.
Well, I mean, when I'm on vacation, I take enzymes to help digest gluten and dairy and soy. And I just don't eat. I don't really like sweets. I like to eat vegetables and protein and healthy fat. So, I mean, that's basically what I'm going to eat wherever. But if I'm somewhere, I mean, I ate this big pork knee and these potatoes. I'm like, had to take a picture of this ridiculousness. But, it just was a nice way to shift into. But I think that's really kind of a cooler way to think about something is maybe, you do a keto diet because you just hit your head hard for, for a couple weeks to help your brain heal. Or you go into a low protein plant-based cleanse for 5 to 7 days. I'm also looking at just like in my cleanse detox program that I do, I have 2 days of normal detox eating, and then 1 day that's a true intermittent fasting window that's abbreviated, and then go and lower protein and plant-based, and then I go to the other. So I think it's good for us to start to think of how we shift, right? And that's what I'm using this for.
Great. Yeah, it's basically capitalizing off, the previous phase to give you a little bit of a head start.
And so I think kind of the reframe is, what if you went on a program and you dropped 7 pounds and it got you to get some bad habits out, put some new good habits in, and you kept 5 of the 7 off, and then, went around with your kind of revised diet for the next couple months, and then went, okay, I'm ready to downshift again, and then did it again. That's a much more viable way to think of eating than this constant deprivation, which is silly and not going to work. And the other piece is to really think about adding before you're taking away. Like, okay, so I'm not going to eat dairy anymore. What are the things that I can put in place so I won't miss it?
I love that. Yeah. And it's more of an evolutionary thing too, right? We never had periods of probably really long fasting. We never had periods of really extended overeating either. So it's probably a little bit more, biological.
It makes so much sense, right? I mean, think about how we do exercise. We know in the fitness world that if you do the same workout every single day, your body acclimates and you just don't see the results you were seeing. And that you also run the risk of having overuse injuries, right? So why wouldn't we, if we want to do exercise variability, why wouldn't we want to have macronutrient and caloric variability? It just makes sense.
Absolutely. JJ, thank you so much for your time. You're doing amazing things, and you have a big supporter in me and all of my listeners. So where can our listeners find you? And where can
jjvirgin.com. And the free challenge is at jjvirgin.com/challenge.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Join us on benpakulski.com to learn the cutting-edge techniques to take control of your body, your brain, and create your greatest life.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pakulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.